Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by just welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see all of you guys. Good morning. Sawadee Krap. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we help you guys to learn the path to enlightenment through the original words of the Buddha. I'll explain to you guys what the Pali Canon and English study group is after we do our meditation, because we start each class with a meditation. Essentially what we do here is we guide students in helping them to understand the path to enlightenment, how to train your mind to get to peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind. And this comes through training of the mind. There's certain other qualities that you will experience as part of getting to enlightenment, but this is just one of the major components, is that you no longer experience any discontent feelings. And this comes through training of the mind. So there's meditation that you need in order to train your mind, but there's other aspects of the training too. So that's why we study the words of the Buddha, so that you guys can see the full path of what the Buddha actually taught, to be able to understand how to move your mind to enlightenment through training. So I'm going to start with meditation, and the way that we meditate is we start with some chanting. And if you'd like to join along in the chanting, you're more than welcome to. The chants are on a laminated sheet over there on the table. You're welcome to help yourself and get one. There's Pali words, and then there's the English translations that you'll see, and we'll be chanting these as we ease into meditation. If you guys end up getting one of those sheets, you might see a lot of admiration and respect and gratitude for the Buddha. And because of this, I don't think the Buddha actually created these chants himself. They were probably created by his students, either during his life or after his death, because the Buddha doesn't walk around saying, here, chant these things out of admiration to me. That would be ego and arrogance and putting yourself above other people. And the Buddha doesn't do that. An enlightened being doesn't do that. So I suspect his students created these chants either during his life or after his death. The way that the Buddha used chanting is that everything he taught was oral, so he would teach orally. They didn't write things down during his lifetime because the technology to write things down didn't exist in that region of the world, so he taught everything orally. And then every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings, word for word for word, through chanting. So the chanting isn't anything mystical or magical. It's not a rite or ritual or a ceremony or worship or prayer or anything like this. The Buddha didn't teach any of those things. If you've been exposed to those things as a result of encountering Buddhist communities, that's not what the Buddha actually taught. There's a lot of misunderstandings in the world. The Buddha never taught rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer, and these kinds of things. He taught to cultivate wisdom. He taught to train your mind, to uproot certain pollutions in your mind that are causing these discontent feelings. And then by training your mind and uprooting these pollutions, you'll experience the peace and the joy starting to come shining through, where you can experience the qualities of the enlightened mind. So we'll ease into meditation with the chanting. Then there's going to be a period of time where I'm guiding you in the meditation. You'll hear me speaking as we're actually meditating together. Everyone here at the temple and anyone joining us online will just all be meditating together. Then there'll be a period of time where I'll just be quiet. We'll just be meditating together. I'm sure you're going to hear occasional things like a dog barking or a bird chirping or things like this. We even have some construction going on downstairs. We're refurbishing our classroom to make a even nicer, more welcoming classroom for all of you guys. So you might hear a little bit of sound down there related to that. So you'll hear sounds. And as long as you don't crave permanent silence, then you can maintain your peacefulness and your joy. But if you have a longing and a yearning for permanent silence, when you're meditating and you hear a certain noise or a sound, you might get discontent. But you can train your mind that all these things are impermanent. Whatever amount of sound or lack thereof that we have right now, that's not permanent. You're going to hear sounds as we go. But that sound also is not permanent too. When that car goes by, or that dog is barking, or that bird is chirping, there's going to be impermanent nature to that quality of the sound. So it'll arise, it'll change, and it'll fade away. So you can just remind yourself of that while you're meditating, that you're going to hear sounds, and that's completely normal. It's impermanence. Then after we go through the period of time where we're just all meditating together, then we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting, and you guys are welcome to chant along again there as well. And then that's where we'll start the class today. And I'll explain to you guys what the Pali Canon and English Study Group is. In terms of your body positioning for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught. He taught seated, lying, standing, and walking. But a lot of times people are learning in the seated position. So I'll give you guys some guidance on the seated position. And there's not just one way to actually sit, but this guidance that I share with you will kind of help you to find what's comfortable for you, because it's all about finding what's comfortable for you. You can sit on the floor, you can sit in a chair. Maybe if you're at home, you're on a sofa or a couch or in a wheelchair or something like this. You can sit however you're comfortable. If you're on the floor, you might decide to have some cushions under your rear. This will kind of soften your seat a bit. And then you can just lightly cross your legs, where if your legs are real tight, it's going to impede the circulation and you're going to experience pain in the lower body. So if you have your legs lightly crossed, this usually works best. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets your hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. And again, it allows the circulation to flow in the lower body. The Buddha put his right hand over his left, and then he put his thumbs together and he put this into his lap. This is how the Buddha meditated, but it's not about everybody doing it exactly the same way, because people are going to find different things to be comfortable. So there's other options here, not only with how you sit, but with your hands and arms as well. Some people like to put their hands on their thighs or on their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So wherever you're comfortable with your hands and arms, you can just place them there and understand that it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. And if you're in a chair, some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at their ankles. But you can see me in a chair, I'm sitting with my legs crossed. So you could really sit however you're comfortable. And then the same thing, you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. It's nice if the upper body is erect. By having the sternum up and the shoulders back, it keeps the mind attentive and alert during your meditation so that you can actively train your mind. When you're meditating, this is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. And you would like the mind to be attentive and alert during this time frame. So by having your sternum up and your shoulders back with your body erect, this keeps your mind attentive and alert. And it also helps to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Because with your sternum up and your shoulders back, you'll be able to more easily breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with chanting, and then I'll come back in with some guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakhato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno สกาโตโรกาวิตูอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสตาตาวาปานุสนังโอโตภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. ระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะคะวาพุทธังมหาคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาคะวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภะคะวะเตOkay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Again, welcome to all of you guys here at the temple. Welcome to everyone joining us online. Nice to see all of you guys this morning. As I mentioned, today is our Pali Canon and English study group. I'll explain to you guys what that is. But before I do, I'll just like to share a few things with you guys to help you feel even more comfortable here at the temple if this is your first time here. Up here on this level, we have two bathrooms. There's one here, the first door, and then the very last door in the back as you first come up the steps. That's also a bathroom as well. Feel free to use the restrooms anytime you like. There's even restrooms outside. If you go out to the parking lot, you'll see signs that take you around to the main temple bathroom. There's a large bathroom that's over kind of behind the building, so feel free to use that at any time. We have snacks and refreshments over here that is provided by our students that you're welcome to help yourself to. It's over there on the table, so feel free to help yourself to anything that you see over there. You can use that as you like. It's provided by our students. So again, today is our Pali Canon and English study group. This is where students oftentimes move into this program after they've already developed a really nice foundation in the path to enlightenment. If this is your first time here or your first time studying the teachings of the Buddha, it's okay. You'll learn plenty today, but just understand that some of the things that we talk about might be beyond what you currently can understand, because there's certain teachings that you need as foundation in order to be able to understand some of the more deeper teachings. And we have various programs and classes and courses and retreats here to be able to help you guys to develop your foundation in the path to enlightenment. And you can learn here at the temple, or you can learn online, because whatever we do, we live stream it. So no matter where you are in the world, you can actually attend live. There's people attending now that are all over the world. And if you can't attend live, they're actually recorded, so you can actually watch them at your own pace. So on Sundays and Wednesdays, we have what's called the group learning program, where we use this first book of our book series, and we go chapter by chapter in this book. This book is titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is a book that you can download for free. You can get access to it. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed copies here at the temple by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon if your country has access to Amazon. And each Sunday I go chapter by chapter by chapter, helping you guys to understand the path to enlightenment. Tomorrow I'm going to be in chapter 4, which is the very first teaching of the Buddha. So it's an ideal time to actually come to the temple, because you'll learn what's called the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is explaining to you the problem that the Buddha discovered in the mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. Because as I mentioned at the beginning of class, the goal of the teachings of the Buddha is to help you train your mind, get to the point where you no longer experience any discontent feelings, so that you can eliminate your anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings can actually be eliminated from your mind. But you wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't understand what was causing your feelings. Right now, you might think that other people are causing you to be angry or sad or frustrated. But what you'll see tomorrow, if you study either in the class or through the recording, is that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And that's why you can actually eliminate them. Whereas if it was everyone else who was causing these feelings, you would have to go around the world and train everybody else to do things your way. But when you come to understand that your mind is experiencing these feelings based on what's going on within your own mind, then you can come to understand what that is and then actually eliminate it. But you wouldn't be able to actually eliminate these feelings if you didn't know what was actually causing them. So tomorrow I'm going to be explaining that. And if you're ever interested in a kind of a slow learning over a 7-month period, that program is ideal for you. We meet at Sundays and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. here at the temple, and I live stream it. And then I do it at home at 9 p.m. and I live stream that, so that no matter what time zone you're in, there's a live class available for you. And then you can take the class through the recordings too. Some people just watch the recordings because they're not able to attend the live classes. And that is a 7-month program that students will go through. And then we have various courses that happen where they're like Monday through Friday from 9 to 3, that help you to gain a foundation in the path to enlightenment as well, and various topics like that. And then after students have a really nice foundation, they will typically move into this program, which is referred to as the Pali Canon and English Study Group. What the Pali Canon is this is the original teachings of the Buddha. They're in 45 large volumes of books that are about this thick. He taught from the age of 35 until 80, so we have a lot of his teachings in this particular collection of books. It's called the Pali Canon because it's in the Pali language. The original that we have access to is in the Pali language. The Pali language is no longer a spoken language today, so it's been translated into English. And that's what we have in all these other books. We have from volumes 2 through 13, we have the Pali Canon in English. We're in volume 5 today. In this Pali Canon in English study group, we study the original words of the Buddha. And while the original words are in those 45 large volumes, it's been consolidated down into 13 books to be able to help you to be able to learn and digest the teachings in kind of a reasonable time frame. So you can also get access to these books for free from our website by downloading them, by printing them yourself, by getting printing versions here, or downloading them on Amazon. We're in volume 5 today in this program because it's a 1.5-year program where students are gradually working their way through the entire book series. And this 5th volume is titled The First Stage of Enlightenment, Stream Enter. And to be able to understand a lot of the teachings that are in that book, this book number 5, you would really have needed to study volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then that helps you to be able to then learn what's in volume 5 and beyond. But because I know there's students that come here and they're brand new, maybe they're coming for their first class, I will teach you in such a way that it'll kind of help you to be able to understand even what we're actually studying as part of the class today, even if you've never studied the teachings of the Buddha ever. The way that we do this program is I have these chapters here. We invite somebody from here at the temple or on Zoom, if you're in Zoom, to volunteer to read the particular chapter. These 3 paragraphs here is the chapter. And what you have is the original words of the Buddha. You have a reference which takes you back to the Pali Canon. This shows you in the original text where this shows up. So you could actually go back to see, is this actually from the Pali Canon? And then you've got words from me that are helping you understand how to integrate this into your day-to-day life. Because the Buddha teaches very clear and very concise and very precise. You don't have to interpret his words. He talks very clear, but sometimes his teachings are related to other teachings that you might not know. So it's helpful to have a dedicated practitioner and a dedicated teacher to kind of be like a tour guide for you and pointing out for you the things that you need to learn. It's your journey to enlightenment. You're your own journey, your own independent journey. But a teacher is like a tour guide kind of pointing out for you the things to learn and understand. So that's what I'm doing here in these words. So if there's someone in Zoom or someone here that would like to read this, what we do is we kind of have this more as like a study group where a student will read this. I will spend about 5 minutes or so teaching about that particular chapter, and then I will open up to any questions that you have. If you would like to read or if you have questions here at the temple, we just ask that you use the microphones that are in front of the camera in that white bowl there, because then we'll be able to hear you here at the temple and they'll be able to hear you online. If you press the gray button, you'll see the lights come on. You can hold it up to your chin, and then we'll be able to hear you here. They'll be able to hear you online. Whereas if you talked here at the temple without a microphone, they wouldn't be able to hear you online. And we may not even be able to hear you here with some of the construction that's going on. So if you could use a microphone for your questions, or if you volunteer to read, that would be really helpful. And then you can keep these microphones with you because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question. So you can just share the microphone with the people around you who have plenty of microphones to use. And then if anybody in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom would like to ask questions, you can put that into the comment section and I'll be able to see that. And for those of you guys in Zoom, if you would like to ask questions or read, you can electronically raise your hand and then unmute your microphone, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you in the live stream. So we teach this particular class more like a study group, where all of our other programs, it's more of a traditional style of learning where I'm teaching for like 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I'm opening up to questions that you guys might have. And then I teach for another 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up to questions that you guys might have, where today's class is more of a study group, much more interactive. So it looks like Claire has a hand up, so maybe she would like to read this first one. Go ahead, Claire, if you'd like to read.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chapter 11, the complete destruction of three fetters. With the complete destruction of three fetters, he is a 7 times at most attainer, who after roaming and wandering on among heavenly beings and humans 7 times at most, makes an end of discontentedness. With the complete destruction of three fetters, he is a family-to-family attainer, who, after roaming and wandering on among wholesome families 2 or 3 times, makes an end of discontentedness. With the complete destruction of three fetters, he is a one-seed attainer who, after being reborn once more in human existence, makes an end of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here the Buddha is talking about the 3 fetters. There's actually 10 fetters total, but in order to get to this first stage of enlightenment, which this book is all about, you need to eliminate the first 3 fetters. And there's other things that you need to do as well, but the mind needs to eliminate these 3 fetters. What a fetter is it's a pollution or a taint or a defilement. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they had something called a fetter, that if you were a criminal or someone that they were trying to confine to a certain area, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. What a fetter is a shackle and a chain and a ball. And they would basically keep you in an open field, and you would be confined to that area. You couldn't really go anywhere because you have this ball and this chain around your ankle. So when the Buddha discovered these 10 individual pollutions in the mind, he understood the tools and techniques of how to eliminate them and get to enlightenment. He described these pollutions as fetters because they're keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. So there's 10 individual fetters, and you would need to eliminate all 10 in order to be able to get to enlightenment. And that's where the mind starts performing with this brightness and this radiance. You'll see these qualities of enlightenment starting to shine through as you're working on eliminating these 10 fetters. But it's not until all 10 are actually eliminated 100% that the mind is actually enlightened. But when you eliminate the first three, the mind is moved into the first stage of enlightenment. And there's certain teachings that you would need as a foundation to be able to get to that first stage of enlightenment. And getting to that first stage of enlightenment, there's a significant reduction to your discontentedness. You're going to see significant improvements in the condition of your mind and your life as well. So what the Buddha is describing here is that with the destruction or the elimination of the first three fetters, these first three pollutions of mind, that he is a 7 times at most attainer. What he means by this is that if you die in this stage of enlightenment at this point, that you will come back into the world, into the human world, no more than 7 times before you will eventually then get to enlightenment. That's why he says, after roaming and wandering on among heavenly beings, meaning you might have been reborn in the heavenly world, but ultimately you will come back to the human world, 7 times at most makes an end of discontentedness, meaning you've made an end to the discontent feelings of anger, sadness, frustration, and all those others. That's getting to enlightenment. So when you get to the first stage of enlightenment, if you die there, you will be reborn back into the world as a human being. All the teachings of the Buddha are not based in belief. They're based in you learning and growing and developing and cultivating wisdom. What I'm talking about now about rebirth and the cycle of rebirth and being reborn into the heavenly realm and all these kinds of things, these can all be independently verified. Right now, you might not have the wisdom of how to do that, but there's the ability for you to be able to acquire that wisdom. By the time we get to volume 11, that's where we start talking about the cycle of rebirth in a lot more detail, and you get the wisdom of how to independently verify these things. So when you come across these kinds of things, particularly when you're first getting started on the path to enlightenment, and you hear things like the heavenly realm and all the other realms and rebirth and things like this, what I encourage people to do is just set that aside, because what's happened in the past, it doesn't really matter right now. And what may or may not happen in the future, it doesn't matter. What matters is right now you're in the human realm and you have this ideal existence and this ability to be able to get to enlightenment. And it's important that you don't believe any of the teachings, including the cycle of rebirth in these 5 realms of existence. So when you're first getting started, it's better to focus on the foundational teachings like we were talking about earlier. So if you put the cycle of rebirth in front of you and you're trying to approach that, then that can hinder you from being able to understand the original teachings and the core central teachings to be able to make your way towards significant improvement as you're first getting started on the path to enlightenment. So what I encourage people to do is just set aside the cycle of rebirth and get to that at some point in the future, and instead focus on the real foundational teachings. But here, since we're talking about these stages of enlightenment and the first stage of enlightenment, the Buddha is going to teach about the cycle of rebirth and how this factors into that. Or he's going to teach about the realms of existence. And he taught these things because it's true and it's independently verifiable. As you're eliminating the pollution out of your mind, if you start having vivid memories of your past lives and you didn't understand the cycle of rebirth, this could really shake you up. You could think you're going crazy. If you started having these vivid memories of being murdered or something else and you know it didn't happen in this life, it could really shake you up. Or if you start having communication with beings from these other realms, because these other realms like hell, animal realm, afflicted spirits, of course the human realm, and the heavenly realm, while we oftentimes think of them as being really far away, and we even refer to them as realms, all these beings are in the same time and space as us. So these beings can actually communicate with you. And as your mind starts becoming more enlightened and you eliminate pollution out of your mind, you might notice that these beings are actually communicating with you. You might hear things that other people aren't hearing. And you might think you're crazy. You might think you're schizophrenic, for example. But if you understand the cycle of rebirth and the 5 realms of existence, you know what this is and it wouldn't shake you up. And some people can even see these beings. Like the hell beings, they're formless beings. They don't have physical form. The same thing with afflicted spirits. We might refer to these as ghosts. Or heavenly beings. They lack physical form as well. They don't have physical form. They're formless. But some people can actually see these beings. So if you didn't understand these 5 realms and the cycle of rebirth, this could really shake you up when you start seeing these things. So the Buddha isn't explaining to you the way the world should be. He's not not giving you rules and commandments. He's not giving you a bunch of beliefs. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And by you understanding the way the world is and awakening to that wisdom, then you'll be able to navigate the world more peacefully. So here, he's referencing these things because it's the truth. And it does connect into understanding the first stage of enlightenment. Then this next piece, he's saying, okay, with the elimination of three fetters and having been coming into the world to a certain degree, that an individual could be reborn among wholesome families and moving from family to family. Being reborn into a wholesome family provides you a better opportunity to get to enlightenment. Because if you're born into a family who's fairly polite and respectful and kind and loving and warm, this is going to help you to learn those things as well. Whereas if you're born into a hostile, harsh, aggressive family, a bitter family that has maybe fear and hostility and resentment, you're going to kind of embody that as well. You're going to kind of conform to that. You're going to learn from that. And that's going to make it harder for you to get to enlightenment. So being born into a wholesome family, it actually helps you to be able to get closer and closer to enlightenment. So an individual who has gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, what the Buddha is saying is this individual is going to be reborn into wholesome families. So some of you guys may have been in the first stage of enlightenment in a previous life. If you were born into a wholesome family in this life, you may have been reborn from that previous life where you were in the first stage of enlightenment into this wholesome family. And maybe now is the time for you to be able to get to enlightenment in this life. And then he talks about this one seed attainer. What this is somebody who is in the first stage of enlightenment, but when they die, they're going to die, come back into the world. They're going to make their way all the way to enlightenment from that next existence. Even though they were a stream enter or a first stage of enlightenment in their existing life, when they die and they're reborn, they're going to then get to enlightenment in that next life. Okay, so any questions here on this particular chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one. This is chapter 12. Is there someone who would like to read this? You got it? Okay, go for it, Pat.
Abandoning 6 things one is capable of realizing accomplishment in view. Monks, without having abandoned 6 things, one is incapable of realizing accomplishment in view. What 6? Personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observance, craving leading to the plane of misery, anger leading to the plane of misery, and ignorance, unknowing of true reality, leading to the plane of misery. Without having abandoned these 6 things, one is incapable of realizing accomplishment in view. Monks, having abandoned 6 things, one is capable of realizing accomplishment in view. What 6? Personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observance, craving leading to the plane of misery, anger leading to the plane of misery, and ignorance, unknowing of true reality, leading to the plane of misery. Having abandoned these 6 things, one is capable of realizing accomplishment in view.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is talking about 6 things that need to be eliminated from the mind in order to be able to get to this first stage of enlightenment or accomplishment in view. Because in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you need to develop accomplishment in view. There's something called right view, which you develop and establish early on in your practice on the path to enlightenment. And that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow with the 4 noble truths. I'm going to be helping students to establish right view. But then as you develop more and more and you've established right view, there's something called accomplishment in view, which is a deeper understanding of right view and being accomplished and having a particular view about understanding what's really causing the mind to be discontent and how to move it to this enlightened mental state. And I teach this accomplishment in view at other times, but this is some of the aspects of developing accomplishment in view. These first 3 that the Buddha is talking about here that need to be eliminated from the mind, these are the actual first 3 fetters. the ones that he was talking about earlier. This is personal existence view, doubts, and wrong behavior and observances. These are 3 fetters that you learn as part of your journey to enlightenment, and understanding what these pollutions are, what the symptoms of them are, how to eliminate them, and how to know that you've actually eliminated them. This is part of your learning and growing on the path to enlightenment. And when you understand what they are and you understand the symptoms of them, you can see your own mind and you can see like, yeah, I have those symptoms if your mind hasn't eliminated these yet. And then when you apply the tools and techniques to actually eliminate them, you can see that they've actually been eliminated, and you'll see that the mind is peaceful and joyful as a result of having eliminated these 3 fetters and others as well, that your mind will become more and more peaceful. So the Buddha is saying, okay, to get to accomplishment in view, you need to eliminate these first 3 fetters. And if you guys have questions on what these 3 fetters are, I can explain them to you. Just let me know that you have questions. Then he's talking about having eliminated these 3 things. What these are called the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. This is what's causing the mind to experience the discontentedness. That essentially the craving is the longing, yearning, the mind wanting things to be a certain way. When your mind has wants and expectations and you want things to be a certain way, if you get what you want, you get happy, you get excited. But when you don't get things the way you want, you get angry or sad or frustrated or irritated or some other discontent feeling. Your mind is craving permanence. Think back to when you were a child and you wanted ice cream or chocolate, and you begged and pleaded with mom and dad to give you ice cream and chocolate, and they gave it to you. You were so happy. You're the best mommy and daddy ever, right? But then at some point in the future, you were begging mom and dad for chocolate and ice cream, and they wouldn't give it to you. And then you got angry. It wasn't mom and dad that caused you to be angry. It was your own mind. It was the craving. It was the desire. It was the longing and the yearning. When you get things the way you want, then the mind's happy. But then when you don't get the things the way you want, you get angry or sad or frustrated. You can see this with your boyfriends or girlfriends or your husbands or wives. When they do things the way you want them to do, you get happy and excited. But when they don't do things the way you want them to do, you get angry or sad or frustrated. You can see this if you bought a brand new car or something like this. When you first got it, you were so happy and so excited. But then when it got a scratch on it, you got angry or frustrated or irritated. This is the mind craving permanence. It's wanting things to be a certain way. And as long as your mind has craving, it's going to continue to experience anger and frustration and sadness and all these other discontent feelings over and over. And when this anger is arising, the mind, with its lack of wisdom, will falsely attribute this to something external. And you will tend to push people away, or you'll push the situation away. You might have done this, where there's been certain people in your life that you thought that they made you frustrated, they made you angry, so you might have pushed them out of your life. But you can see that that didn't solve the problem, because you still get angry, you still get annoyed, you still get frustrated. Or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile to people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring, trying to fear this other being into doing things your way. Or you might have tried to put your expectations on people and try to control them and force them to do things your way. People might be doing this to you. They might be pushing you away. They might be bitter, harsh, and hostile to you. And they might be putting their expectations on you and trying to control you. And this is because the mind's anger, it becomes unskillful because it doesn't understand the true cause of this anger. The true cause of this anger is the craving, desire, attachment, the wants, and the expectations. So when those are getting fulfilled, the mind gets happy, right? So when you get your bank account up to this level, you get so happy and excited. But then because that is impermanent, when your bank account drops, you feel sad or frustrated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling. Or if it's sunny outside, you might be so happy and excited, but then when it rains, you might be frustrated and sad. This is the mind craving permanence. When you live in an impermanent world, as long as your mind is craving permanence, when you live in an impermanent world, everything around you is constantly changing. But if your mind is craving permanence, which all unenlightened minds do, then you'll experience this anger. And then the third one, this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality, this lack of wisdom, this misunderstanding, because the mind misunderstands, it's confused, it has a lack of wisdom, the mind doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. The mind in the unenlightened state will firmly believe that other people are causing you to be angry, or other people are frustrating you, or your brothers or sisters are annoying you. This isn't actually true. If you look at this through an objective way and you really see and penetrate into it, you can see that it's your own cravings, desires, attachments that are causing these anger and frustration and agitation to arise. And this is to arise wisdom. But in the unenlightened state, there's a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance that the mind has. And as long as it has this craving, anger, and ignorance, you'll stay stuck in this continuous cycle of experiencing anger and frustration over and over and over again. So what the Buddha is saying here is that in order to get to accomplishment in view, you have to have eliminated a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance. At this point, you haven't eliminated all of it. It's just enough craving that it doesn't lead to the plane of misery. What he means by this is the lower realms, being reborn into hell, animal realm, or afflicted spirits. That by the time you get to this first stage of enlightenment, you won't be reborn down into the lower realms. If you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to come back into the human world again, because you've become a better and better human being. If you go around being bitter, harsh, and hostile and resentful towards people, you don't have control over your mind. You don't have discipline of your mind. You're functioning kind of like an animal, growling and roaring at another human being, trying to get them to do things your way, trying to fear them into doing things your way, like a lion growling and roaring at another lion, right? Well, if you have that amount of craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind, when you die, you're going to be reborn down into the lower realms, either hell, animal, or afflicted spirits. But these aren't permanent existences. If you're reborn into those lower realms, you will have an opportunity to make your way back into the human realm. But now that you're in the human realm, no need to go back to those lower realms. You can actually train your mind, cultivate the mind, and get to the point where you're experiencing peace and joy in this life. And that's the beauty of the teachings of the Buddha, is that you can see the condition of your mind gradually improving in this life. It's not about believing a bunch of things and hoping something good happens when you die. It's about getting to peace and joy now in this life. So the Buddha is describing that, yes, you need to eliminate the first three fetters, but then you also need to eliminate a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance in order to train the mind to get to a certain amount of peace. And the way that you do this is through what's called the Eightfold Path. This is the core central teaching of the Buddha, where he's guiding you and how to eliminate these things from the mind. So I'm going to be teaching that over the course of this Sunday coming up and next Sunday. Over the next 2 Sundays, I'll be teaching the entire Eightfold Path, helping students to be able to understand this. And I've taught it many times, so if you can't attend live, you can actually watch the recordings from tomorrow and next Sunday, or there's plenty of recordings on the Eightfold Path on our YouTube channel, on our podcast, and our Facebook group. You can actually learn that even before we get to that point if you would like to, because that's the real training that's going to help you to move your mind to this enlightened mental state. So this is what the Buddha is saying that needs to be eliminated. And then having eliminated it, that's where he's saying, okay, one has realized accomplishment in view. Okay, so any questions on this chapter? Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. And you guys here, you can use the microphones. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Okay, so let's go to chapter 13. Let's see what we've got here. We're going to start getting into some really challenging chapters. Chapter 14 is actually the deepest, most ultimate teaching of the Buddha, and it takes a lot of preliminary understanding to be able to get to that point. So let me see what we've got here. Okay, Claire, you would like to read this one? Go ahead, ma'am.
Oh, I can't unmute.
Yeah, you're off mute now.
Okay. A stream enterer understands as they really are the cause and the passing away of the world. Monks, without having abandoned 6 things, one is capable of realizing accomplishment in view. Monks, an instructed noble disciple does not think, when what exists, does what come to be? With the arising of what, does what arise? When what exists do volitional formations, choices, and decisions come to be? When what exists does consciousness come to be? When what exists does name and form come to be? When what exists does the six sense bases come to be? When what exists does contact come to be? When what exists does feeling come to be? When what exists does craving come to be? When what exists does clinging come to be? When what exists does existence come to be? When what exists does birth come to be? When what exists does aging and death come to be? Rather, monks, the instructed noble disciple has wisdom about this that is independent of others. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When there is ignorance, volitional formations, choices and decisions, come to be. When there are volitional formations, consciousness comes to be. When there is consciousness, name and form comes to be. When there is name and form, the six sense bases come to be. When there are six sense bases, contact comes to be. When there is contact, feelings come to be. When there is feeling, craving comes to be. When there is craving, clinging comes to be. When there is clinging, existence comes to be. When there is existence, birth comes to be. When there is birth, aging and death comes to be. He understands thus. In such a way is there a cause and effect to the world. Monks, an instructed noble disciple does not think, when what does not exist, what does not come to be. With the elimination of what is what eliminated. When what does not exist, do volitional formations, choices, and decisions not come to be? When what does not exist, does consciousness not come to be? When what does not exist, does name and form not come to be? When what does not exist, do the six sense bases not come to be? When what does not exist, does contact not come to be? When what does not exist, does feeling not come to be? When what does not exist, does craving not come to be? When what does not exist, does clinging not come to be? When what does not exist, does existence come to be? When what does not exist, does birth not come to be? When what does not exist, does aging and death not come to be? Rather, monks, the instructed noble disciple has wisdom about this that is independent of others. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that is eliminated. When there is no ignorance, volitional formations, choices and decisions, do not come to be. When there are no volitional formations, consciousness does not come to be. When there is no consciousness, name and form does not come to be. When there is no name and form, the six sense bases do not come to be. When there are no six sense bases, contact does not come to be. When there is no contact, feelings do not come to be. When there is no feeling, craving does not come to be. When there is no craving, clinging does not come to be. When there is no clinging, existence does not come to be. When there is no existence, birth does not come to be. When there is no birth, aging and death does not come to be. He understands thus. In such a way, the world is eliminated. Monks, when a noble disciple thus understands as they really are the cause and the passing away of the world, he is then called a noble disciple who is accomplished in view, who is accomplished in vision, who has arrived at these true teachings, who sees these true teachings, who possesses a trainee's wisdom, who possesses a trainee's true wisdom, who has entered the stream of the teachings, a noble one with penetrative wisdom, one who stands squarely before the door to the deathless enlightenment.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way back up here, even though this discourse is kind of explaining a lot of the same things. So what this discourse is referencing is what's called dependent origination. This is the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha, and it's actually in the next chapter. It's chapter 14. Dependent origination explains the cycle of rebirth, and it explains all the detailed steps of why you experience not only rebirth, but discontentedness as well. It's the Four Noble Truths that I'm going to teach tomorrow, which is the first teaching that gives you a little window into the unenlightened mind. It kind of helps you to understand what that is. Then it's the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots or the three fires that goes deeper into this to help you see kind of the wider spectrum of what's going on in the unenlightened mind. Then the Buddha has the 10 fetters, which gives you a detailed description of the pollutions of the mind. But then in terms of rebirth and the detailed work of exactly why your mind keeps experiencing discontentedness, it's dependent origination that explains that. So what the Buddha is saying here is that if an individual has accomplishment in view, abandon those 6 things that we've already talked about, then they've also gotten to the point where they understand dependent origination. That's why he says the instructed noble disciple. An instructed noble disciple is someone who's deeply studied his teachings. That's a noble disciple, a really deep student who's deeply understood his teachings. Does not think, when what exists, does what come to be? With the arising of what, does what arise? The reason why they don't think about that is because they already know. They already know the answer. Someone who's studied the teachings directly already understands when what exists do volitional formations or choices and decisions come to be. It's ignorance. This is the top line of dependent origination, that if ignorance or the unknowing of true reality exists, then you're going to make unwise decisions. And when you make unwise decisions, it's going to lead to a consciousness being created. And then when that consciousness is created, that's the mind, then there's going to be something called a name and form. What name and form is name and form is essentially the physical body. The Buddha goes into details about this, and I can explain it to you if you like, but just think about it as the physical body for now. That if there's a consciousness, it's going to find a physical body. And now once it finds a physical body, then the 6 sense spaces are going to be developed. That's the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. These are called the 6 sense spaces. Then when you have the 6 sense spaces, you're going to experience contact through these 6 sense spaces. And when you have contact through these 6 sense spaces, you're going to experience feelings, either pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. These feelings are called conditional feelings. They're based on a condition. That condition is contact, that when you have this contact coming through your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, your body, or the mind itself, you're going to start experiencing feelings. And the reason why is because of this craving, this longing, yearning. When you experience contact through the 6 sense spaces, when you have craving in your mind, you're going to see that contact as either agreeable or disagreeable. And if you see that contact as agreeable, you'll experience pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if you see that contact as disagreeable, then you'll experience the anger, the sadness, the frustration, and these other feelings. So that's coming from the craving. And when there's craving in the mind experiences those pleasant feelings. So, for example, going back to when we first experienced chocolate or ice cream, then when we tasted it, we had that contact through our tongue, right? So we had that contact through our tongue. We then experienced the pleasant feeling, and now we started craving it. We were longing, yearning for it. We not only wanted it in that situation, we wanted it multiple times. We kept longing, yearning for it. because we were clinging to these pleasant feelings. We wanted these pleasant feelings to last, and we saw it as this chocolate and ice cream is what gave us those pleasant feelings. So it's this craving and clinging that's allowing that to continue. Then there's this existence where a being is actually in existence, and now they're actually born, and whenever there's birth, there's going to be aging and death. Right? And then when there's aging and death, the Buddha doesn't have it up here, but he does in Dependent Origination, which is next. There's going to be sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. This is how this whole mass of discontentedness comes about, that it starts with this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality. And then there's these 12 interlinking steps that the Buddha is walking you through and showing you how a being comes into the world. And this is something that you can independently verify. So what he's saying is someone who's accomplished in view doesn't think about these things because they've already thought about them. They've already investigated the teachings. They already understand the teachings. They've already independently verified it, and they know it's true. So they understand it. And he just goes through and kind of explaining that in different ways. That a noble disciple has wisdom about this that is independent of others. What he means by independent of others is other people don't understand dependent origination. Dependent origination isn't a common teaching that the average person understands. Even the average person who's on the path to enlightenment, they may not understand this if they haven't encountered a teacher who's actually teaching it. So dependent origination is wisdom that you will ultimately cultivate that is independent of others. Because other people might be believing that they only have one life, but an individual who's penetrated dependent origination, they've seen the truth through independent verification that there is this cycle of rebirth. Okay, so the Buddha just goes through and kind of describes that in a bunch of different ways. And then eventually he gets down here where he talks about a noble disciple, meaning someone who studied his teachings very deeply, who is accomplished in view, who's accomplished this view, is also accomplished in vision. Whenever he's talking about a vision, he's talking about being able to see the path to enlightenment very clearly. Because by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, which this book is all about, you haven't actually gotten to enlightenment yet, but you can see the path very clearly. You haven't done all the work that you need to do, but you've gathered all the teachings that you need. You've got a teacher. You've been developing your mind to a certain degree that you can see the entire path to enlightenment. So that's what the Buddha is saying. Whenever he says accomplished in vision, he means that you can see the entire path to enlightenment. You can see these natural laws. Who has arrived at these true teachings, that's what we were just saying, who sees these true teachings, who possesses a trainee's wisdom, a trainee's true wisdom, who has entered the stream. We refer to this first stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer, because just like a log enters the stream and it's going to eventually get to the ocean, the same thing is true that once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Either in this life or some future life, you're going to be able to get to enlightenment, a maximum of 7 rebirths. So an individual has entered the stream, meaning they're going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. A noble one, that's also someone who's studied very deeply with penetrative wisdom, someone who's penetrated the teachings with wisdom. You're not believing the teachings. You've learned them, investigated them. You've then reflected on those teachings to independently verify them. And then you're practicing the teachings, integrating them into your life and actually training your mind. That's how you independently verify his teachings. So you've penetrated the teachings with wisdom. One who stands squarely before the door to the deathless. The Buddha sometimes refers to enlightenment as the deathless or the deathless element, because once you get to enlightenment and you actually die, it's not considered death. It's considered the final enlightenment. And at that point, the body and the mind separate, and now an individual is experiencing final enlightenment. So in this life, you can get to enlightenment where your mind will no longer experience any mental anguish. You will eliminate all your anger, sadness, frustration, and all those other discontent feelings that I mentioned. But you're still going to experience physical pain, but it's going to be very muted compared to what you once experienced. So if you stump your toe in the unenlightened state with a lack of wisdom, not only will you experience the physical pain, but you're going to experience mental anguish along with it. Because your mind is craving permanent comfort, when you stump your toe and you feel that pain, then right away your mind's going to crave permanent comfort, and you're going to maybe start cussing and upset and angry and frustrated, and it's going to heighten your physical pain because now you've got this mental anguish to go along with it. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're still going to experience that physical pain if you stumped your toe, but there's not going to be any mental anguish. So you'll actually have a muted amount of physical pain. And you're going to need a certain amount of physical pain because as an enlightened being, if you are standing too close to a fire, you need to feel that little bit of heat so that you know, I'm standing too close to the fire. Let me move away from the fire. So you're going to experience some degree of physical pain even when the mind is enlightened, but there won't be any mental anguish along with it. In fact, if you stump your toe in the unenlightened state, you might be angry and bitter and harsh and hostile and cussing and resentful, using profanity. But if you stump your toe as an enlightened being, you might actually start laughing, right? You might start giggling, you might start laughing because you find it to be funny. You won't actually be experiencing the mental anguish. You might just rub your toe because you know that that pain is impermanent. And you might just rub your toe and just kind of laughing and like, look at this, the toe is hurting a little bit, and you'll be over it within a matter of minutes or seconds, right? So here, what the Buddha describes is this door to the deathless, where you're no longer experiencing death, you're experiencing final enlightenment. Because as long as you're in this existence, the body and the mind are together, and you're still going to experience that physical pain. But when you get to enlightenment and the body and the mind separate, then there's no more physical pain. It's completely gone. That's why we call it final enlightenment instead of death. So someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment, they're standing squarely before the door of the deathless, meaning they've cultivated a certain amount of wisdom and they've gathered up a certain amount of teachings that now they're standing in front of the door. They haven't walked through yet, but they're standing in front of the door. The way that I think about this is that if you were going to try to hike Mount Everest and go to the summit of Mount Everest, you're not going to just stumble your way into base camp at Mount Everest, right? You would have done all kind of preliminary work. You would have checked out various boots and jackets and hiking poles and ropes and, ice axes and picks and things like this. You would have done all kinds of preliminary work to be able to train to get to the point where you're at base camp at Mount Everest. None of us are just going to stumble into base camp at Mount Everest. You're going to do that with a lot of intention to be able to get to base camp. Well, if you're at base camp at Mount Everest, you have everything you need to get to the summit. You haven't done it yet, but you have everything you need. You have all the equipment, you have a tour guide, you have tents, you have jackets and equipment and things like this, and you just need to keep making your way further on this journey, right? So that's the same thing with the first stage of enlightenment, is that by this point, when you're standing squarely before the deathless, this door of the deathless, you've gathered up everything you need. You haven't actually done it yet, but you have what you need. You have a teacher, you have the true teachings, you've developed your mind to a certain degree. You can now make your way on this journey to be able to get your way to enlightenment. And that's what it's like to be in the first stage of enlightenment, that you've gathered up all these things. And you'll notice a significant decrease to your discontentedness. It'll just be a mere fraction. So if you were angry and hostile and bitter and harsh prior to the path to enlightenment, by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, there's this significant reduction to your discontentedness. And now you just need to make your way further on the path to get to the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind now has eliminated all of its discontentedness. And that just takes continuous training and development with all the tools and techniques and the teachings that you already have. And then you're going to still need help and guidance from a teacher as well along the way. So that's why the Buddha refers to this as standing squarely before the door to the deathless. That's enlightenment itself. He even refers to it as the deathless element sometimes when he's talking. So do you guys have any questions on this chapter? Anything you'd like to ask? No? Okay, let me check online here. Okay, I'm not seeing anything online either. Okay. So let's go to this one last chapter for today. This is chapter 14. This is actually dependent origination. This is what he was just referencing in the last chapter. This is considered to be the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha. And oftentimes students are building up to be able to understand this. So I will walk you through this and help you guys to understand it. But if you don't understand it today, it's okay, because there's a lot of preliminary teachings that you usually need to know before you actually understand this. And even students who have done the preliminary learning, they even need to spend time with this to be able to fully understand it. So is there someone who would like to read this? You got it, Pat? Okay. So we're just going to read the first part. We're not going to read the individual elements of dependent origination.
Dependent origination as a law of nature. A stream enterer understands condition, the cause, the elimination, and the way leading to the elimination of condition. First discourse. Monks, with ignorance, unknowing of true reality, as condition, volitional formations, choices, and decisions come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the cause of this whole mass of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here, this is the top section of dependent origination. And what the Buddha does down here is he explains each one of these elements of what each one of these factors are of dependent origination. So we're not going to go through all of those, but if you guys have questions on any of these, just let me know and I'll help you to understand it. So what the Buddha is doing here is he's showing you this cause and effect, or this action and result. He's a master at this. He's showing you that if this exists, then this is going to come to be. And if this exists, then this is going to come to be. And if this exists, that comes to be. So for example, stepping away from this for a moment, if you go to school, you will learn English. And if you learn English, you'll be able to talk to people. And when you're able to talk to people in English, you can apply for a job. And when you apply for a job, you will get a job interview. When you go to a job interview, you will get a job. When you get a job, you will have an income. When you have an income, you'll be able to purchase food. When you purchase food, you'll be able to eat that food and you'll be able to sustain your life. Right? This is showing cause and effect. By learning English, you are able to sustain your life and be able to eat food. Right? So it shows you this steady progression. And of course, we could say the same thing about other languages too. It's not just English that does that. There's other languages that you could go through this whole cycle as well. But it's showing you this cause and effect, this action and result. It's showing this causality, that when this comes to be, this will come, this will exist, or when this exists, this comes to be. When this exists, this comes to be. It's showing this cause and effect. So the Buddha is saying that when there's ignorance or this unknowing of true reality, when there's a lack of wisdom in the mind, then you're going to make decisions. You're going to make choices and decisions, volitional formations that are going to lead to a consciousness or the creation of this mind. Then when there's the creation of this mind, then it's going to find a name and form. What the name and form is the physical body, that this mind has to find this physical body. Then when there's this physical body, then it's going to grow these 6 sense bases: the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. When you have these 6 sense bases, you're going to experience contact through those 6 sense bases. When you experience contact through those 6 sense bases, you're going to have feelings. When you're experiencing feelings, your mind's going to then have craving, this longing, yearning, wanting things to be a certain way. Then your mind's going to have clinging, where you're holding on to things tightly. Then there's going to be existence, where this being exists in the womb. Then there's going to be birth, where this being comes out into the world. And now when there's birth, there's going to be aging and death. This being is going to age and is going to ultimately die. And as part of that process, you're going to experience throughout your life sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. This is how discontentedness comes to be. It's because of this ignorance. This is the whole thing that's keeping everything in place. If it wasn't for this ignorance, none of these other steps would take place. So what ignorance is the unknowing of true reality of these natural laws of existence. So the way that you dismantle this, because that's what you're ultimately working to do on the path to enlightenment, is dismantle dependent origination and get to the point where there isn't any longer any discontentedness and there isn't this continuous rebirth over and over. So in order to do that, you've got to get rid of ignorance. That's the ultimate thing that you're working to get rid of. So from the very beginning of the path to enlightenment, I teach students not to believe anything that I say. Don't believe anything that are in books. Don't believe anything that anybody teaches you about the teachings of the Buddha. You would like to independently verify it for yourself. This is what the Buddha taught. That you learn, you examine, you investigate his teachings. You then reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or false. You look around the world through your own direct experience to try to determine whether this teaching, any teachings that he shares, are true or false. Then you practice his teachings, integrating them into your life on a day-by-day basis, training your mind. And then that's where you arise wisdom, because you know the truth. So when we talk about the 5 precepts or the Eightfold Path or meditation training or any of these other things that we talk about, it's important not to believe it, that you learn it intellectually, examine it, investigate it, you reflect on it to independently verify it, and then you practice it. And then you'll see the truth for yourself of what is the true teachings of the Buddha. And by arising that wisdom, you have eliminated more and more ignorance. And as you're eliminating your ignorance, you will make wiser and wiser decisions. And you will experience more and more wholesome results in your day-to-day life. And you'll notice that your consciousness is improving, that you don't have this longing, yearning in the mind. Eventually, as the consciousness is extinguished, then it won't be able to find a name and form because there is no consciousness. Then there won't be any 6 sense bases. There won't be any contact, so therefore there won't be any conditioned feelings. There won't be craving or clinging or existence. There won't be this birth. There won't be aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. That will all be dismantled by cultivating wisdom. So what this gets you to understand is that it's the cultivation of wisdom that leads to enlightenment. That's why rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is not anything that the Buddha ever taught, because that doesn't lead to enlightenment. That doesn't lead to the elimination of discontentedness. If you've been taught rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, even in a Buddhist environment or people that consider what they're doing Buddhist, it's not what the Buddha taught, because it doesn't lead to wisdom. That's actually part of the ignorance, is that the mind thinks if I sprinkle some water on you, somehow you're going to feel better and your life's going to get better. Or if I tie a string on your wrist, somehow your life's going to get better. This isn't what the Buddha taught, even if you see these kinds of things going on. He taught you to cultivate wisdom. By cultivating wisdom, that's what's going to lead to improvement in your life. So each one of us, we had a mind and it found a name and form inside of our mom's womb, right? So in our past lives, we had, let me come down here to this table. I think it'll help you if you see this table. Here we go. In our past lives, we had ignorance and we had certain volitional formations. We chose not to get to enlightenment in our last life. Those were choices we made. And it was from our ignorance because of our lack of wisdom of the path to enlightenment. Currently, the present effects of that is that we have a consciousness. We have this physical body. We have these 6 sense bases, and we have this contact. And if you're unenlightened, you're going to be experiencing certain pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant, these conditional feelings. Then, in the present moment, if you continue to have craving and clinging, then there's going to continue to be existence. And if that continues, then the future effect is that you're going to experience another birth and you're going to experience more aging and death. And then the sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair will come about. So you're working to dismantle all of this. So this kind of is a table to help you to be able to see dependent origination, past effects, present effects, and then the future as well. Okay, so at one time in our past life, we had this ignorance. And right now, if you're unenlightened, meaning you still experience anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, you still have a certain amount of ignorance in your mind, or unknowing of true reality. I tend to not use this word ignorance because it's more of a derogatory word, a demeaning word, and a Buddha doesn't speak that way, an enlightened being doesn't speak that way. I prefer the phrase unknowing of true reality, or misunderstanding, or confusion. So if your mind still has this lack of wisdom, then that means you're making certain decisions that are unwise. Your mind's experiencing these unwholesome results coming back to you from your own unwise decisions. And what that's going to lead to is it's going to lead to another consciousness, which is then going to find a name and form, which then forms the six sense bases. You're then going to experience contact. You're then going to have feelings. Then there's craving and clinging that is created. Then there's going to be another existence. There's going to be birth, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So as long as the mind continues with its ignorance, then it's going to continue this cycle over and over and over again. That's why your mind keeps experiencing anger and frustration. So if you come out to your car and you see a scratch on your car and you get angry, that's because the mind's craving. It's wanting things to be permanent. And now it continues to experience this anger and frustration. So even though we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, like you guys saw before, it's really because of ignorance that craving continues in the mind. And as long as there's craving, there's going to be the anger, the frustration, the agitation, and annoyance. So you could almost look at this like a math equation, that ignorance plus craving equals anger. That's where your anger is coming from, is your mind's longing, yearning. If mom and dad do this, you're happy. But if they do this, you're angry, you're frustrated. If it's sunny outside, you're happy. But if it's raining, you'll be angry or sad. This is because of the ignorance. The mind doesn't understand that the world is impermanent. It can't be permanently sunny. Your parents can't permanently do what you want them to do. Your bank account can't permanently be here. So when you have wisdom of the natural laws, you understand the universal truth of impermanence. You understand that these things are all constantly changing. And you get to the point where you're no longer craving for permanence. But you need to gradually train your mind to get to that point. Okay, so this is a bit of understanding of dependent origination. I'll see if you guys have any questions. Does anybody have any questions on this? Claire, I see you have a hand up, but I think that might be from your reading before. But if you have a question, you're more than welcome to ask it. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. All right. So what I'll do is I'm just going to end here. It's a little bit after 10:30 by just thanking all of you guys for coming to learn. I understand that this part here is quite detailed and maybe a bit advanced for some of you guys. As I mentioned at the beginning of class, oftentimes students have a foundation in the path to enlightenment before they learn in this program. If you're looking for a place to really get started, tomorrow is an excellent day for that, because I'm going to be teaching the Four Noble Truths, which is the very first teaching of the Buddha. And that's the best place for people to start. So if you would like to come tomorrow at 9 a.m., that's a wonderful place for you to get started on the path to enlightenment, because you can get to the point where you eliminate your anger, you eliminate your sadness and your guilt and your shame and your fear and your anxiety and your stress and things like this, because it's no fun walking around life with those feelings. So if you're looking to heal from what hurts you and eliminate these discontent feelings, tomorrow is a great day for you to be able to learn that. You can come talk with me and I can help you get plugged into resources. If you're not going to be around tomorrow, if you'd like to take a look at these books or see any of these books, you're more than welcome to come see those. So tomorrow, I'm going to be teaching Chapter 4, the Four Noble Truths, Establishing Right View. This Wednesday, I'm going to be teaching students some meditation and probably some chanting and things like that, perhaps, and then opening up to any questions that students have. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well. Have a lovely rest of your day. Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.